Christopher Hansen Bakun. That sounds very Scandinavian.
Huh. My mom, the Hansen side is Norwegian. Yes.
Ah.
Sorry, I'm just driving home. I'll keep my camera off.
Yeah,
Nice to meet you.
I spent the last 10 years in Norway, so I thought that sounded very familiar.
Yes, yes. Thank you for this presentation. I look forward to it.
I hope it's a little bit useful and people get some starting points to look into.
Yeah, thank you guys for joining us. I know some more people will be trickling in, and then we'll have the recording posted as well for the rest of our viewers. But I'll go ahead and get started with an introduction here. My name's Christina. I'm the lead coordinator of GOWME this year. If any of you have not joined us on lectures beforehand, GOWME is an educational platform where students and healthcare professionals can explore and interact with wilderness and emergency medicine. We try to showcase the diverse spheres in which physicians and other healthcare professionals make an impact and inspire others to think abstractly about the ways in which we can utilize our careers in healthcare and medicine. Our goal is to create an international community of wilderness medicine enthusiasts and experts committed to promoting a diverse and culturally competent environment. If any of you are not on our email list already, I will include information in the chat to our website to sign up to continue to receive emails about any of our future lectures and opportunities. We try to have bi-weekly lectures here, and this is the start of our new semester. So I will get started with introducing Kai. He is a paramedic, former military medic, and polar guide with extensive experience supporting remote medical operations in extreme environments. An alumnus of the Remote Area Risk International Medic Program, he has worked across both the Arctic and Antarctic regions, specializing in expedition medical support and austere care logistics. His recent work includes participation in a research expedition to Antarctica, focusing on the integration of telemedicine, portable ultrasound, and modular medical systems in polar conditions. This cutting-edge field research explored the practical application of remote diagnostics and real-time medical consultation in some of the world's most inaccessible locations. Kai regularly collaborates with wilderness medicine educators and logistics teams operating in Greenland, Svalbard, and South America. He is passionate about improving care delivery in expeditionary settings. So I will turn things over to him and we'll get started.
Hello, everybody. I'm gonna try and share my screen here. No, yes, maybe. Okay. Does that work?
Yep, that looks good.
Nice. That's a good starting point. Yeah, as Christina said, I've been a little bit in Svalbard, in Greenland, in Antarctica recently because I was working on a ship in Antarctica. And before you go there, you ask which kind of equipment is available and what kind of medications do you have and what do we need to bring and what is already there. And they sent me a list with a PDF with 6 pages of the nicest and shiniest equipment you can imagine. And I was really happy and I was like, wow, that's impressive. And you don't see that very often. And it was a maiden voyage of a ship. So it was a new cruise ship going on duty. And I was kind of optimistic and said, wow, that's impressive that they take care so well about it. So we exchanged a few emails and everything was fine. And I arrive in Ushuaia in southern Argentina and go on board of the ship and talk to the doctor. And he looked kind of grumpy, was not really too happy. And we walked around in the ship clinic and it was very empty. And I was kind of surprised. And I asked him where all the equipment was. And then his answer was, yeah, we ordered it, but it hasn't arrived yet. And I was a bit confused because we were supposed to depart on the same day in the evening. So I talked to the captain of the ship and asked him what the situation on the equipment was, because we also had to put it in the clinic and then divide it into the right bags and things like that, if that would be the case. And he said, no, we would pick it up the next tour. So we would go without equipment on the first trip, and then when we pick up the next group of tourists, we would also pick up the equipment. And I laughed, smiled, and said, I don't know what you guys are doing, but I am definitely not sailing to Antarctica without equipment. That's definitely not gonna happen. And then there was the usual blah blah, don't be such a jerk, and all other medics do it this way, and it's not a drama, and nothing will happen, nothing ever happened, and blah blah blah. And I stepped off the ship and lost a lot of money by doing so, but it was a kind of very obvious decision that you don't sail around in Antarctica, be responsible for 450 people and have zero equipment. And on my long fly home, where I had a lot of time, I thought, how can we improve that? And why on earth is it possible that these people can do stuff like that without having any kind of on control instance or law enforcement, any kind of check that before they sail, that anybody is checking these equipment. And all these cruise ships operating in the polar regions are only based on SOLAS regulations, safety of life at sea. And that's basically saying the necessary equipment, qualified personnel, um, responsible work. So it's all a lot of fill words, nothing really serious. So if the ship is with a flag from Panama, and in Panama it's enough to have a white t-shirt to be a doctor, then that's what you get. So you can have quite a lot of surprises when working with these people and working with the ships. And that was a bit of a wake-up call for me, because I have been on snowmobile expedition and hiking expeditions before, haven't been connected to the ship people so much before. And that was something which surprised me quite a bit. And that resulted in a paper, Legal Considerations While Providing Medical Aid in Polar Waters, if anybody is interested. And also, I thought it's very important to improve the situation for people working in the polar regions. And the next big surprise was there is no telemedicine system. So you get a satellite phone, and that's your communication line to the outside world. And for an audio conversation, that's nice, but do you really want to describe your ultrasound on the telephone? And what are you gonna talk? What are you telling the cardiologist? The first spike is a little bit taller, the second one is not so tall. I mean, that was 2020, and we had no proper option to share a video or to share a live ECG. And that concerned me quite a bit. And that was then the reason why we started to look into telemedicine and developed our own system based on satellite networks. That's why I have a Starlink here and be connected to a Starlink, as I just told you, because we are using Starlink now as a mobile platform to connect the monitoring. And we went with that to Antarctica in 2024. Dr. Hannah Evans and myself went down there, went on a 16-day, I think 16-day trip, where we tested telemedicine, and it worked quite well. And now we are fine-tuning it a little bit more and integrating live tracking of personnel and also integrating live streams for drones. That's something I'm working on at the moment. But how did I ended up in all these regions? I've been working as a medic in a regular normal ambulance setting, then on a helicopter for a short while, on ambulance planes flying across Europe, picking up tourists with their travel insurances. And then I was on a regular ambulance station again, and we ended up with 300 hours a month, which I decided was a little bit too much. So I asked the army if they would need some medics. So I spent some time as an army medic, went down to the desert, delivered some democracy to Afghanistan, decided that was also not so much my topic, and went back without the army just as a medic and did some tours in the Middle East. And after, I think, 4.5 years between crazy countries, I decided I need to do something different. Moved to Norway, visited a friend, and she said I should apply or I should look for a job in Norway. Started working in Norway and went from tourism guide on a bus for the cruise ship people to having my own company doing photo expeditions on Svalbard and doing all the different polar trainings and polar courses to have this company. Up to the moment that somebody said, but if you're a trained polar guide and you are a medic, why don't you become the expedition medic? And that's where it all started. And since then, I've been with research institutes from Germany picking up snow samples from microplastic to Greenland on snowmobiles, Svalbard on snowmobiles a lot in all kind of different settings. And I think if somebody's interested in working in the polar regions, the most important starting point or the most important point to consider is what kind of training do you really need? Because there's a lot of companies and a lot of options where you can train and where you can take courses. There are a ton of different polar medicine courses, and they are very, very different from the content you get and also from the prices you get. And I would recommend you start with the requested qualifications the client wants you to have. Most people, when you work with ships, want you to have STC 95, a basic safety on ships training. You need passenger and crowd control, and you need Royal Yachting Powerboat Level 2, which is the training course to operate these little small black zodiacs. And I will give you a recommendation where you can pick those trainings later on in my slides. Um, and I think that's a very solid foundation to start with. And if you have been there and you think that's your thing and you are very interested in working in this environment and you for yourself decide you want to take more and different training, then maybe look into other options and look into other polar trainings because there's like the expedition guide company, I think they are called. They are sitting somewhere in Denmark doing training, and they do a Zodiac driving training, for example, which is I think $800 or $900. And I'm not saying they are not providing you with a lot of good information, but you end up with a fancy course and you don't have the qualification you need for the ship on the end of the course. So you just spent $900, went to a very fancy training, and everybody tells you how amazing you are. And then you send your CV and you don't get the job because you don't have the qualification which is really required. So I would start with the basics and then look into other options and more fancy training, so to say. In general, if you look for jobs, who is really running the expedition? What do they want to do there? What's your role? And the medical pre-expedition form is something which is very, very important in my opinion, and it's also a very good starting point to learn something about your client. Because if you are the expedition medic and they tell you you don't have access to that because only the doctor can see that, that's the moment where you can stop sending them emails. I think it's very important that these information are shared and available for absolutely everybody, and that you also know what you can inspect when you go down there. What's the medical background, or at least a rough framework of who are the clients you are traveling with, because sometimes there is a lot of a lot of surprises. And also ask for the whole expedition, for the complete trip, for everything which is planned during the trip. Because if there is a snowmobile trip and you have never been on a snowmobile before, and then you are inspected to drive a snowmobile on your own, or you are inspected to be a polar bear guard and you have never fired a gun, it's very important to ask for all these details. The picture in the background is a group of people from a Czech film company who were on Svalbard filming for, I think, almost 4 weeks. They have done a lot of green screen filming before and came now to Svalbard to kind of fill their green screens. So they were mainly interested in landscape filming and landscape information or landscape settings to do the filming. And we were very happy to show them around, and we always tried to convince them how beautiful Svalbard was, and they were completely unimpressed and totally didn't care. They really needed, as an example, we need pancake ice from a 35-degree angle during sunrise. And everything else that day, they really didn't care. You could have given them a polar bear to pet, they would not have looked up pancake ice, what was important this day. Very interesting work and very interesting group of people, very nice people, but also something I completely did not expect to work like it did. It was fine, but usually when you are out with a group of tourists, they are stopping their snowmobiles every 5 minutes because everything is so beautiful and we need to take a picture and just for a moment, and we can go home later, we can stay a little bit longer. And they were really, really disciplined when it came to safety, but very, very specific about the needs of where to go. So that was something which made planning quite interesting because, of course, Svalbard is not delivering what you need just this moment. You have to deal with weather, you have to deal with light, temperatures, and all these things. So it was quite challenging to get all the boxes ticked they wanted to tick during such a small time frame. Plus, they had a ton of equipment which needed to go with us. So quite an interesting client and an interesting week. Safety information for the Arctic. I would say look at the universities. They are usually very, very good when it comes to getting safety information. Svalbard has the UNIS, the University Center of Svalbard, and they have an amazing safety course for the students. And for the safety course, there are a lot of slides. As for example, field safety in the winter is a PowerPoint presentation, which is a very, very good starting point to look into what to bring and what to have. Of course, on Svalbard, you want to talk to Sysselman, to the governor of Svalbard, and register your expedition and explain to them what are you planning to do, what do you need for your expedition, are there any specific things involved, are you staying outside of Longyearbyen overnight, who are your polar bear guards, are you bringing a helicopter or a drone or anything other specific, and all these things have to be confirmed, planned, and sorted before you go. Also, something for the medics, very important. Don't buy any medications, don't buy anything which has a date on it before you know 100% that this trip will really happen. Because there have been cases where very, very big filming companies wanted to go to Svalbard and do some filming, and then the governor said, nope, you're not doing this on Svalbard, you don't get a permission, and the whole thing crashed and went on weeks or months later. So that can be quite an expensive experience if you buy everything you need and then you have it and the whole thing doesn't start. Good thing to be a bit thoughtful and really wait until you have a written confirmation that this will really happen. Arctic Safety Center is part of the university and is something which is a very good place to look into polar bear safety courses if you have a chance to come to Svalbard. Otherwise, I would say the Arctic Safety Center and maybe Arctic Adventure, which is a tour operator on Svalbard, operated by Jens Abil, a guy from Denmark who lives on Svalbard for 100 years, very, very experienced guide who is also doing training and can also provide you with polar bear guards. I think these are very good starting points for Svalbard. When it comes to logistics, if you need to bring something around on Svalbard, Pool Position is a good company to talk to. And SAS, the Scandinavian airline, to get stuff on to Svalbard. SAS sucks at service. It's really true. They are really, really good in losing equipment. But between Norwegian, Wizz, and SAS, I would still say SAS is the best company to fly with and plan at least a week to have everything delivered before you arrive. Maybe contact UNIS, the University Center in Svalbard, ask them if you are allowed to send your equipment to them and then get a confirmation from them that everything has arrived before you fly yourself, to make sure you can bring things if they get lost. It has happened and it will happen in the future. For Greenland, there is a lot of good tour operators in Kangerlussuaq who you can talk to, and a lot of them have good experience with sending equipment around because they work together with the polar cruise ships and they are used to deliver things to the smaller ports because Greenland has an extra challenge. Greenland has no road connection between the cities or villages, so everything has to go either by boat or by helicopter or fly by plane. So it's good to have companies who are spread it out over Greenland where you can send things to Kangerlussuaq and then pick it up from them on different places in Greenland. That I can make a list or attach a list. I think I have one. Remind me to upload a PDF later where you can see different companies you can talk to if you are interested in doing something like that. Accident reports can be quite useful. There is a lot of publicly available material when it comes to the polar regions and accidents reports. The report you see here on the right talks about Yima-Bukta, which is a glacier on Svalbard. Very interesting case. The glacier had a glacier calving, and because of very, very low tide and low water, the ice hit dry land. And that meant that the ice was not just breaking into the water and creating a wave, it hit the ground and then went horizontal over the water and hit a lady in her neck, and she died instantly in the Zodiac. So safety regulations, what am I supposed to do? Where can I go? Where can I not go? What are accidents which have happened in the past? And do I really know all these things? Have I done the training which I should have done for these things? It's not to scare anybody off of this, but it makes sense to worry about this before you go and not when you are down there, because it can be quite dangerous if you are not careful. I would say the main challenges are weather. The second challenge is transport. How do you get your equipment in place and how do you move around yourself? Have you been on a snowmobile? Have you been driven a Zodiac? Have you been out at sea in polar night? All these kind of different challenges which can occur depending on the season and depending on the weather when you are down there. And communication, as I mentioned, if you want to have a telecommunication or you want to have telemedicine, make sure you look into the systems which are offered, make sure they really exist to start with, and then make sure they really work. There was a Greenland expedition recently, and I understood they had quite some trouble with their inReach. So not everything which looks fancy in the brochure and looks fancy in the shop is working quite well. I know that from Svalbard, satellite phones work very good. GPS has worked always flawlessly and without any problems. We've used inReach, but only to communicate, never to use it as an emergency system, because from my understanding, the whole thing takes far too long. The alarm setup from an inReach before you really get help takes quite a while. So it's easier to contact Sysselmann direct. Works much faster. Participants, how old are your participants? Where are they coming from? Are they fit? Are they not so fit? Do they have medical conditions you don't know about? Do they need to bring any medications? And if so, can these medications survive out in the cold? Do they need to be stored somewhere specific? Are they gonna run out during the expedition? Do you need to have a backup storage of medications? Do they run out because the stuff can't stay out in the cold for long periods of time and you know already you need more? Where can you refill and these kind of things? Also something which is good to consider before you go and have a good planning about. All this should happen before you even pack your bags. Make sure everything is in place. Make sure everybody's on the same page. Everybody in the expedition or on the trip has the same goals or can at least identify with the same goals. You don't want to have 5 people who are really interested in photographing, who want to stop every 5 minutes to take pictures of wildlife, and other people are there to win a race or want to reach the top or want to make as many miles as possible on a snowmobile. Good to look into these kind of things so you don't have bad dynamics in the group and everybody is there for the same goal and can identify with the same goal. This is 3.5 kilometers away from the capital, from Longyearbyen. So it's very, very close to the capital, and it's also very, very close to the only hospital which is there, which has 6 beds, by the way, and is a little bit of a larger emergency room. But you can see just by looking at the terrain and by looking at the water in the middle, because Longyearbyen is on the other side, the logistics you need to get these 2 people home if something happens is quite impressive. So even if it looks very close on the map, and even if you see on the map that the hospital is very close by, it makes sense to get good information about the terrain, the area where you are going, and what kind of options you have for transport and for rescue. This is one of the mountains pretty much on top of the city, also very, very close to the city center. These kind of trips are totally normal and are happening daily pretty much in the winter. There's a lot of tour companies going up in these locations and nobody there brings a medic. So you might have a first aid trained person who is the guide, but there's no expedition medic going on these trips. So just to give you an idea, if they are asking for an expedition medic, that's not what they are inspecting. They are inspecting something much more complicated or much more challenging. Usually when you are asked to be expedition medic. So it's a good idea to have a look around on Svalbard or on Greenland and see what's normal, what are people doing on daily, regular, normal trips, so to say, and then also get an idea of what do they consider to be an expedition and what's happening there. It's a bit hard to see because our camera pictures are blocking the picture, but you can see there's like a polar bear safe glass box strapped to a Zodiac, and that's where the camera operator is sitting in. So these kind of little bit unusual transport options happen quite frequently. And even so you are the medic of the group, it's very likely that you will end up with a second job. You might drive a Zodiac and bring guests from shore back to the ship, and the opposite way around. You may end up becoming a polar bear guard. And all these things are quite normal and quite regularly happening, but it's good to get this information in advance, of course. You don't want to find this out by surprise, and the people you work with also don't want to find out that you have never done this before or you're not comfortable with it. So it's good to really have a detailed briefing in the beginning. What are you inspecting from me? What do you want me to do? What do I want to do? What am I willing to do? What I don't want to do? And then make sure that if you say, yes, I want to do these things, make sure you're really comfortable doing it. And if you get 2 or 3 or 4 roles, you might also want to ask if the payment is also doubling accordingly. Svalbard and Antarctica is really, really a completely different story. Flying to Svalbard, I would say, is as easy as flying to Italy. It's very, very, very simple, which is one of the reasons why you have to mm, make sure that everybody who arrives really understands where they are. Um, if you're in Germany and you fly to Svalbard, it takes maybe 6 hours at most likely less. You can fly to Oslo, which is an 1.5, 2 hour flight, and then you have another 3 hours and you are on Svalbard. So people who have been walking around in Berlin at Starbucks drinking their chai latte are standing in Svalbard a few hours later, and now they are inspected to understand that they cannot take off their gloves because they get frostbite, and they cannot leave the house without a gun. Um, I think you can see where I'm going with this. This is not happening. People don't talk a little bit about polar history and make sure everybody really becomes the feeling of where we are and what are you doing. Because when you reach Svalbard, you are in the northern part of Alaska when you look on the map. So you are really, really high up in the north, and weather can be very interesting. And you are not supposed to leave the city if you're not in a car without a firearm. So polar bears are really not a joke on Svalbard. There have been a lot of incidents, and it's really, really hard for people to understand all this because, again, a few hours before they have been in a very fancy city with a lot of logistics and a lot of comfort. So it is important to have this in mind and make sure that everybody understands now you are really in a different setting. Antarctica is a little bit different because just by flying there, you are getting a very good impression of distances. It takes forever. At least for me, it takes always forever to go there because we are flying to Buenos Aires usually, and then from there to Ushuaia. And then you have 3.5 days on a ship where you cross over to Antarctica. So just the travel gives you a good idea that you are reaching a completely different destination. This is all Svalbard, and this is more the Scandinavian north, I would say. You could go to northern Norway or to Finland and find similar settings, while Greenland or Antarctica really looks a bit different. So also for the planning and for the mode of transport, your preparation should look quite different. You might have the comfort of being on a big ship and only use the small Zodiac to go to the shore and back. And then you can, of course, bring a larger backpack and have all the equipment you want on the ship if you are able to get them to Ushuaia. While if you are doing a trekking or hiking trip on Greenland, you probably don't want to bring all this equipment because you won't be able to move it around. Polar bear or leopard seals, what's the area where we going? What kind of wildlife can we inspect? Do we have to deal with polar bears on Svalbard or Greenland, or do we have to learn something about leopard seals because we are in Antarctica and we are a lot around on the water? Which areas are we traveling to, and have there been accidents before? Is there any wildlife colony we know about already? Has there been interesting weather conditions or interesting landing conditions on the shorelines? These kind of things are useful to check. Make sure you take your equipment out and try your equipment with the clothes and the gloves you are wearing on the trip. Might sound stupid, but if you put on winter gloves or you put on two pair of winter gloves and then you open up your backpack, you might not like the zippers you have in there because it might take forever to open compartments up and reach certain places and certain pieces. So it's a good idea to try this out, and maybe also in a little bit a colder environment or a windy environment or a dark environment, just to get an idea if the equipment you are planning on bringing will work in the setting you are going to. Here are a few options to look into trainings. Most of that is from Svalbard, but all the Svalbard training is, in my opinion, totally good for Greenland and Antarctica as well. So if you are doing safety training and polar bear training on Svalbard, that's totally fine for Greenland as well. And the guide training you can get on Svalbard, there is SGO, Svalbard Guide Opplæring, which is organized by the government, the governor, and the tourist information. That's the course. I remember, I think it's about a week or a little bit more than a week, which is a very good foundation. If you want to really take a deep dive, there's the ANG, Arctic Nature Guide, the study program, which is a multi-year program. Very, very good training and extremely well thought through with very, very good instructors. But then you also need the time and the money to join such a training. As I said, start with what do you really need for the job, and then make sure you can tick these boxes. And when you have done that and you have been on the first job and you think that's the right thing for you, then you can still look into getting more knowledge and getting a deeper understanding. Medical equipment, I told you the story with the ship where I received the fancy PDFs and on the end nothing was there. So learning point was I want to see a picture. Make sure you really get a confirmation that you can really inspect this medical equipment to be in place. And then if there is equipment in place, does it really make sense for what they are planning to do? If you have a lot of monitoring equipment and you have super low temperatures and no options to charge batteries, then it's probably not so useful. And if you have certain medications, can you really transport them? Will they survive the weather? Will they survive the bumping around on a snowmobile or on a dog sled? And yeah, these kind of considerations are important and should be considered and should looked into. If you have your own equipment and you want to bring all of that, make sure you talk to the companies you work with and ask them how much luggage are you allowed to bring. And if you are allowed to bring as much as you want, who is going to pay for it. And when the expedition is over and you are flying home, who is transporting your equipment now? Because they might give you a flight ticket with 20 bags on the way down, but not necessarily in the opposite direction. And if you bring your own equipment, who is going to pay for that equipment? Like, are you getting payments for using your own equipment? And yeah, these kind of things should be considered and planned. Try your kit. I already said that. Make sure you use your equipment in the setting you are inspected to work in and with the clothes you are supposed to wear. Maybe in the wind, in the dirt, in the dark. Can you strap the backpack or can you strap the stretcher or whatever you want to bring on a snowmobile? Can you bring it on a dog sled? Does it survive spray water over multiple days? All these points are relevant, especially when you work from a ship. Water and salt water is definitely a topic. Communication and emergency management could be its own lecture. I think Starlink is a good thing. Starlink is something which has worked for me quite well and quite reliable. Satellite phones are great, but give you an audio communication, nothing more than that. So if you want to exchange medical data, you cannot send large files over a satellite phone network. That doesn't work. So important to talk to the client and ask if they have Starlink already, if they are using certain networks you can use as well, and if not, if they are okay to pay for it. And then, of course, you also want to have somebody in standby or at least somebody available. If you really want to have telemedicine, you want to make sure there is somebody available for you all the time during the expedition where you can ask your telemedicine questions. Medical evacuation points. On Svalbard, as I said, there is a hospital, very small hospital, 6 beds. It's more like a larger emergency room, and they fix you up to get ready to go on a plane and then fly to the trauma center in northern Norway. Antarctica, what you bring is what you have. There are a few stations, there are a few research stations which have medical resources, but they have medical resources for themselves, not for anybody else. And you should not plan to be able to use these resources because normally you will not be able to use them. There have been very, very fancy medical evacuations, which also make it into the media and into the medical world. But 3-day evacuation with 4 different militaries involved who schedule planes and organize medevac flights. I'm not sure if I would plan on that. I don't think that's a reliable bridge. So I would say usually it's 3.5 days before you are back in Ushuaia. So you can expect to be with your patient for 3.5 days. And that's the way you should plan. And then if something comes up and it goes faster and everything is becoming easier, then fine. But that's Antarctica. It just takes a long time to sail from Antarctica back to the mainland. Personal equipment and preparation. Vaccination is an interesting topic because if you want to go on land, on shore, and you want to travel around in Argentina or the places you pass before you come to Antarctica, you might have a requirement for certain vaccinations. So you have to look into that. Svalbard is part of Norway, which means you have the vaccination requirements for Norway, which are very basic and not really running. Vaccinations for your client is important topic because hepatitis and these kind of things, of course, should be covered so you don't have to worry about it when something happened. I think I made these points already. If you bring backpacks, make sure they're easy to open and easy to operate. Don't want to have 20 different small pouches and then you have 3 pairs of gloves on and you can't reach your equipment. Medications must fit inside your parka. Remember, everything gets very cold. So if you use something like Pentrox, for example, you can take out the little bottle, put it in the inside of your down parka, leave the plastic pieces outside in the cold, and you still have a useful medication which can travel around with you. And we talked about communication already. Transport options on expeditions, Zodiacs, dog sleds, snowmobiles, larger tracked vehicles on Svalbard quite often, especially if you work with film companies. They have huge snowcats and these kind of tools. So not only should you be comfortable around these tools, you should also consider this for your risk assessment because if you have big tools around, you might also have an option for an accident or injuries. The second part of this talk will be held by Matthew from Remote Area Risk International, and he will talk a lot more in detail about insurances, legal coverage, what happens with media if you have an accident on an expedition, and what to consider in this kind of angle. He does a great job on doing that. I've done a lot of my training with Remote Area Risk International, and I can highly recommend them if you're interested in these legal topics. There is a offsite safety management course, which I've done, where I got my knowledge for these kind of topics and problems, and I think it's a good starting point to look into that. For Antarctica, there is a lot of different companies who provide different services for the cruise ship industry. And these people are very useful because they have an amazing network of logistics and an amazing network of contacts. So if you talk, for example, to the harbor at Ushuaia and you ask for somebody who picks you up at the airport and brings you to the ship, you will automatically get in contact with these companies. Can we upload a PDF and make that available for everybody somehow?
Yeah, I can upload a document.
Okay. Then you can have a look into this PDF and you should find a few of these companies. Get in contact with them, ask them if they can help you with bringing people from the airport to the ship. In Buenos Aires, quite frequently, you have to travel from one airport to another to get to Ushuaia. And they are very, very good with this. They can also help you with declaration of luggage, medications, medical equipment, and get all this through customs, which can also be an interesting point. They have done this many, many, many times. So good, good starting point for getting that sorted out. My training recommendation, go to the Arctic Safety Center, look at their website, look at their trainings. For everything polar related. And I mainly suggest safety training, like Arctic safety training in the context of Arctic survival and polar bear safety training. If you want to learn how to drive a snowmobile, have a winter vacation in Finland. Really, like you don't learn more snowmobile driving just because it's called a guide course. Go to Finland, have a nice winter vacation, and go on a few snowmobile trips. It's totally fine. And the same goes for dog sledding. I would not pay 3,000 or more to to do a polar guide training to go on a dog sled. You can totally do this um, on your own in your own framework in a just normal regular winter vacation setting. and get your nose cold by experiencing it this way. And then you can talk to your client and say, hey, how long is the trip? What kind of snowmobile are you planning to use? And these kind of things. But you don't learn more snowmobile driving just because it's called fancy guide course. So Arctic Safety Center for safety training, Remote Area Risk International for medical training. If you want to do a little bit more, they have a good connection to expedition dentistry, which is a good topic to look into as well because it can ruin your expedition quite well. So looking into dentistry a little bit and what's possible there is a good thing. And if you want to learn how to drive a Zodiac, Rip School Scheveningen in the Netherlands with Katinka is a very, very good place to do that. And remember, you need a Royal Powerboat Level 2 certifications if you want to drive Zodiacs on the ships. Staying outside of Longyearbyen and staying overnight out on Svalbard is something which needs a little bit more planning. You have to make sure the government has confirmed that. That's the first thing, because otherwise you get in a lot of legal trouble. And then the second thing is you need a lot of personnel for doing that. Because you need polar bear guards and polar bear watches out. And these people will obviously not sleep if they are out at night, which means they have to sleep on the next day. And so you see, you need quite a large crew to be operational and be able to do polar bear safety and polar bear guiding. Arctic Adventures is a good company to talk to on Svalbard if you need external polar bear guards. Guns and flare guns and weapons, you need a specific permission from the governor to carry a rifle and also to lend one. So if you want to go to Svalbard and go to the sport shops and bring a gun for your expedition, you can do that and it's not a problem, but you have to plan on that beforehand. You need a permission from the governor to pick up a gun. Then you hopefully know how to handle a gun. Then you hopefully have done your polar bear training so you know what to do and not to do with this gun and with the flare gun. And then you can go out on your expedition. Emergency management on Svalbard is quite good in my opinion. But don't inspect miraculous things because they will not happen. There's a helicopter. Sometimes there are two helicopters. They are able to fly if the weather makes it possible for helicopter flying, but they bring a relatively small crew. So if you're out with a large group of people, there are limited resources. And reaching Longyearbyen in a medical emergency is only half the win because, again, it's a very small hospital with very limited resources. So you probably need an air medevac to go to the mainland of Norway. I think that was a lot for a first talk. So if anybody has a question, let me know, please. Then I have more information if you still want more.
Yeah, thank you so much. If anyone has questions, feel free to put them in the chat or just speak out. Linda asked if you've ever had polar bear encounters yourself.
Yes, but always from a safe distance. No dangerous encounters with our fluffy friends so far, and I hope it stays that way. I would hate to shoot at a polar bear.
I was
Thank you.
wondering if
Oh,
you've ever
go ahead.
Sorry about that. I was wondering if you've ever had like medical emergencies that you didn't feel prepared to deal with and kind of how you handled that.
I think the only really concerning part is you have a lot of factors you can't influence. Like there is nothing you can do about the distance. It just takes so long. And if you are still a paramedic, you are used to we handle all this in a very, very short time frame and we reach definitive care in like a few hours, while in Antarctica, 3.5 days. And that's the weather is on your side and everybody else is on your side. And everything else has to happen on the ship. But then, of course, we all know that's a very, very limited program which you can provide on a cruise ship.
I was going to ask, what are some of the cold sensitive medications that you were talking about?
I think that was Sweden, where somebody went down a cliff 7 meters, and all we had was the first aid box from a sailing ship. That was a bit concerning. I was not there as a medic, I was just participant of the trip, and then you have a big wooden box with a lot of bandages, and that's all the equipment you have. A bit frustrating.
I can imagine.
Nobody else? No
I
other
think we also
questions?
had a question about what are some examples of the cold sensitive medications that you discussed?
Well, most of the stuff is not really happy in -18. Like, none of it is made for these low temperatures, and especially not for the temperature changes. So if you put it in the inside of your down park and it has 35 degrees, and then you come back to wherever you stay overnight and it has, I don't know, 15, 11, and then you go out for a short while and it goes down to -20, talk to pharmacologists, they're gonna scream at you doing that to whatever you want to bring. So it's more, will it still work if I do it? That's more the questions. And if you look into reports from polar expeditions, people have put frozen Fanta in boiling water and used it afterwards, and it still worked. But that's probably not how you want to start your planning.
Well, if there's no more questions, thank you so much.
That's my last slide. If anybody has questions later at a different time and you want to talk about anything polar related, I'm always very happy to talk about polar related stuff. Feel free to send me an email, and I started putting an ebook together about polar expeditions. It's not ready, it's not beautiful, and it's not really nice formatted, but it has a few useful information inside, so we can make that available. And if anybody wants to have a look inside, then
I
Linda.
actually did have one question, and that is, how prepared are the people who go on these expeditions, the customers actually who are participating? Are these touring companies giving them adequate preparation so that they
No.
are going into the experience with the right clothing and understanding the risks that they're experiencing?
Nope, absolutely not. Like there, of course, not every company is the same, and I don't want to talk bad about everybody, but the average cruise ship tourist, the only thing you don't have to tell them is breathe in, breathe out. So, and Svalbard, we had people from India coming with their winter Walmart jacket telling us they want to go on a 16-day dog sledding trip. And it's fine. You know, they are on vacation. They are not meant to become an expedition guide now. They are spending their money to have a great time. That's why they are guides to take care of these people. But when you plan a trip and you plan to go with tourists, don't expect them to have knowledge about the area. You might get positive surprises, but in general, nope. And the polar bear thing is a little bit like Northern Lights. Nobody believes you until you see the first ones. And it's really, really something which should be taken very serious. There have been bad accidents, and it's 90% of the times they could have been avoided.
Thank you very much. This has been very good.
If nobody else has any questions, then
Yeah, thank you for your time. We'll post the lecture and I'll get a document from you to post with more information as well. So
Thank you so much. This was really informative and a very fun talk.
thank you.